ranking all 30 starting second basemen from 30 to 1 using statistics. Every ranking here will be backed up by some sort of statistical evidence, but let me know if you still disagree. Also, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future videos. It's completely free and you can always unsubscribe at any time. With that being said, let's get into it. Number 30 is whoever the Cleveland Guardians second baseman is going to be. Daniel Schneemann and Gabriel Arias are probably the two favorites to win the starting job come opening day. Below are the stats for Schneemann. They also have Juan Brito, who is yet to play in the majors, a hit first second baseman that could also see time here. Schneemann is a little interesting, as he has really good discipline with an 11.3% walk rate last season. He doesn't hit for power though, and he struck out over 30% of the time last season. Not a good combination. Number 29 is Thairo Estrada for the Colorado Rockies. In 96 games last year, Estrada was one of the worst hitters in the league with a WRC plus of only 64. This is somewhat made up for by his great defense, but only somewhat. In 2023, he was worth 3.5 F4, which is obviously much better than he was in 2024. He refuses to walk with a first percentile walk rate at 2.6%. He also doesn't hit the ball hard at all. There is still some hope that he can get back to his 2023 form, but for now, it's looking bleak for the Rockies second baseman. At number 28 is Lenyn Sosa for the Chicago White Sox. Sosa definitely has some potential offensively. He underperformed his expected numbers a lot last year. His WOBA was 36 points lower than his expected WOBA. His expected batting average was 24 points higher and his expected slugging percentage was 60 points higher. This means he hit the ball well, but he could have been getting unlucky. Defensively, he's not going to provide much value, and he's yet to prove it offensively, so even though there is some upside here, he still has to come in pretty low. At number 27 is the new LA Dodgers second baseman, Ha-Seong Kim. Coming over from the KBO, it's very up in the air if his abilities will translate to Major League Baseball. He's a light-hitting second baseman with his career high in home runs being only 11. As a lefty, I think he's most likely going to be in a sort of triangle platoon with Andy Pages and Tommy Edman. Edman moves to second against lefties, and Pages then plays center as a righty. It's kind of a mystery how Kim will perform, but the ceiling is not that high. At number 26 is David Hamilton of the Boston Red Sox. Hamilton is a very good comparison for the recently mentioned Ha-Seong Kim, a light-hitting lefty that will probably be platooned. The difference is we know what David Hamilton can do, and he is good at least at one thing. That would be base running. He had 6.2 base running runs last season, which was good for 10th in the entire league. A lot of people don't realize the value of base running, not just stolen bases, but taking the extra base with a ball in play. With that being said, Hamilton doesn't excel at getting on base in the first place, which is counterproductive for his elite base running. Coming in at number 25 is Brooks Lee for the Minnesota Twins. A pretty poor start to his major league career muddies the hype that he had coming up as a prospect. He was a well above average hitter in the minors, as well as projecting to be a solid middle infielder defensively. He made a lot of contact last year and he had a low strikeout rate, but he had one of the worst hard hit rates in the league. He was the number 8 overall pick less than 3 years ago, so obviously he still has plenty of time to develop. Number 24 is Jeff McNeil for the New York Mets. McNeil is heading into his 33-year-old season in 2025, and the numbers have been trending in the wrong direction. He still puts the ball in play a lot, just not at the right angle. In 2022, his best season when he put up over 5 WAR, his line drive rate was over 30%, the highest in his career, and he performed very well. But in every other year of his career, it's been hovering around the low 20s. Since McNeil doesn't hit the ball hard, he needs to be hitting line drives that get down in the outfield, and he just hasn't done that besides in his 2022 campaign. At number 23 is Tyler Fitzgerald for the San Francisco Giants. Yes, I know, this is pretty low for the numbers that he put up last season. A 132 WRC plus is pretty high, especially for a second baseman. He does not hit the ball well enough for him to be producing like this. He could be in for some major regression as he overperformed his expected WOBA by over 60 points. He does pull the ball well and also elevates it often, which gives an explanation to this overperformance. I'm a little unsure if he is truly this type of hitter because he never really showed this kind of production in the minors, so I have to be conservative on him going into 2025. At number 22 is Zach Geloff for the Athletics. Geloff was very disappointing last year, coming off an intriguing 2023. The biggest thing holding Geloff back is the swing and miss. Even coming from someone who doesn't really think strikeouts matter, once you start getting into the mid-30s% for a strikeout rate, it begins to ring some alarm bells. Gelof just doesn't make good enough contact for him to be striking out that much. Usually the guys who can get away with that high of a K rate are big-time power hitters, which Gelof is not. He still does have some upside though, and he is athletic and can play good defense at the second base position, so I have him at number 22. Number 21 is Nick Gonzalez for the Pittsburgh Pirates. Gonzalez is kind of just like a better version of Gelof. He makes more contact and better contact with an 84th percentile expected batting average last year. He was worth 1.3 F WAR in just 93 games, which is about a 2 WAR pace. He was above average on defense with 2 outs above average and 2 fielding run value, probably because he's very athletic with a 93rd percentile sprint speed. He's going to be 26 in 2025, so it might be the year he takes a big step. Number 20 is Luis Rengifo for the Los Angeles Angels. Rengifo was not the greatest defender. In fact, he was the second worst according to fielding run value of the players in this ranking last year. He does make up for it offensively. He's had 3 straight years with a WRC plus over 100. The underlying numbers took a noticeable dip last year. As you can see, his xWOBA was under 300, which is not particularly a great sign. It was a smaller sample though, only 78 games, so it's probably best not to put too much weight onto it. Number 19 is Dylan Moore for the Seattle Mariners. Moore is pretty much the definition of average. He had a 105 WRC plus last year, just above league average, and a 0 fielding run value right at league average. He is a great base runner though, as he had 4.1 base running runs last season. Similar to Rengifo, his underlying numbers were not the greatest last year. He does walk at a great rate with a 12% walk rate, so the ceiling's not very high for Moore, but the floor is not very low either. Number 18 is Michael Massey for the Kansas City Royals. Massey had a solid year last year with a WAR of 1.5 through only 100 games. He puts the ball in play a lot, but he also does chase a lot, which leads to a low on-base percentage. On defense, he's above average, so as long as he can keep the offense above average, he should be a solid player for 2025. Number 17 is Gleyber Torres for the Detroit Tigers. Like I said in the first base ranking, this was a confusing signing for the Tigers. They're moving their young second baseman Colt Keith to first base to make room for Gleyber Torres, a much worse defender. I think it would be a better fit if they were to put Torres at first, but maybe he didn't want to do that. I still don't know why the Tigers signed him. Defensively, he was tied for the second worst on this list last year, and we know that most of his value comes from his offense. In 2023, his underlying numbers were much better with an xWOBA of 362, which was in the 85th percentile. Last year, he was much worse in that department with a 39th percentile. Hopefully, he's somewhere in the middle there and doesn't continue to slide, because this is the only thing keeping Torres' value afloat. He's surprisingly still pretty young, as he's only going to be 28 years old in 2025. Number 16 is Bryson Stott for the Philadelphia Phillies. Coming off a 4-WAR season in 2023, Stott saw a lot of regression in 2024. Offensively, he was worse. Defensively, he was worse, but still not awful in either regard. He was an elite defender at second in 2023 with a fielding run value of 12 in the 97th percentile, but in 2024, he only had 1 fielding run value, barely above average. I think the true Bryson Stott is somewhere in between his 2023 and 2024 versions of himself, a 2 to 3 WAR player that puts the ball in play a lot and can run the bases really well. He had a 90th percentile whiff rate and was a 96th percentile base runner according to base running value last season. Number 15 is Jackson Holliday for the Baltimore Orioles. Yes, I know, he was bad last season, but he had a 159 WRC plus in the minors in 2023. In 2024, he had a 142. He had a 20% walk rate in his minor league career. He was the number 1 overall pick and baseball's number 1 overall prospect for a reason. He's shown he can hit for power, walk a lot, and make a lot of contact in every level of the minor leagues. He also had a 96th percentile sprint speed in 2024, which is just another tool that he's shown potential in. Defense is probably going to be his biggest hole as he settles into the majors, but if the offense can develop how it should, that won't be an issue. And remember, this list is predictive, so I'm obviously hoping Jackson Holliday takes that next step this year. Number 14 is Jake Cronenworth for the San Diego Padres. Moving him to first base never really helped Cronenworth, as he just doesn't have the offense to be extremely valuable over there. He actually underperformed his expected numbers by quite a bit last season, with his WOBA being 20 points below expected. I don't know if he'll ever go back to putting up numbers like he did from 2020 to 2022, but he's still solid, and I have him right around the middle at 14. Number 13 is Milwaukee Brewers second baseman Bryce Turang. Turang is definitely a below average hitter, and I think that's here to stay. Last year we saw how valuable he was in the early part of the year when a lot of his balls in play were falling for hits, but I don't think that kind of production is sustainable. We saw it even out throughout the course of the 2024 season, and he ended with a WRC plus of only 87. Now, BWAR says he was very valuable, near a 5-win player. Defensive runs saved says he was elite defensively, and that's what BWAR uses to evaluate defense. F4 uses ultimate zone rating, a newer metric, and it wasn't as high on him. According to fielding run value, he's in the 77th percentile, which is still good, just not elite like DRS says. One thing he definitely is elite at is base running. He had 50 stolen bases last season and 7.2 base running runs, which was 6th in the league. Overall, a good second baseman at number 13. Number 12 is Matt McNeil for the Cincinnati Reds. He's by far the hardest player to rank on this list. He hasn't played since 2023 due to injury, of course, so we don't have as many numbers to look at. In 2023, he was very good, although the underlying numbers are a little shaky with a 332 xWOBA compared to his 370 actual WOBA. On defense, he's been good in the past, so that's another positive heading into 2025. If he plays as well as he did in 2023, he will finish much higher on this list, but there are too many question marks for me to put him any higher. Number 11 is Otto Lopez for the Miami Marlins. Lopez put together a solid season last year, especially on the defensive side. He was the third best defender at the position last season according to fielding run value, while also having a 91 WRC+. Now, that number is not good on its own, but for an elite defender, it's nothing to complain about. Just like Matt McNeil, though, there are some question marks here, mainly about if he can do this again. Number 10 is Andres Gimenez for the Toronto Blue Jays. The Blue Jays went out and got Gimenez this offseason to shore up the second base position. Obviously, we know he's an elite defender out there, as he was tied for the best defender at the position, according to FRV last season. Offensively, though, he just isn't going to do much. The walk rate is low, 4.1%. He has a 7th percentile bat speed, a 9th percentile exit velocity. This means he's almost solely relying on singles and the occasional double to hold up his offensive production, which is why we saw it go pretty low last year at 83 WRC+. At number 9 is Brandon Lowe for the Tampa Bay Rays. Lowe is probably the first entry on this list who's consistently performed well on offense in the past. Last year was a good year for Lowe at the plate with a 115 WRC+ and a 346 xWOBA, which ranked second out of all 30 of these players. He excels at elevating the ball. His ground ball rate for his career is only 36%, which is 8% below the league average. Last year, he had a hard hit rate in the 76th percentile, which when you're hitting the ball hard and in the air, good things tend to happen. He also hits lefties well. He has a WRC plus of 104 against lefties for his career, so it's not like he's only hitting against righties. We have seen good things happen a lot for Lowe, but he needs to stay healthy. Coming in at number 8 is Ozzie Albies for the Atlanta Braves. Much like Brandon Lowe, Albies has struggled to stay on the field, but when he's out there for a full season, he tends to put up great numbers. Last year was certainly one of the more down years for Albies, especially against right-handed pitching, who he only put up an 80 WRC plus against. But you can't ignore the 2023 season when he was one of the best offensive second basemen in the league. He put up an xWOBA of 340 that year, which obviously was much better than what he did in 2024. At number 7 is Brendan Donovan of the St. Louis Cardinals. The past 2 seasons, Donovan has just been really good at the plate. First and foremost, he doesn't strike out. He has a K rate of just 12.4%. He hits a lot of line drives, which leads to a high expected batting average in the 88th percentile last season. The power is not really there, but it's not awful with a hard hit rate in the 37th percentile. Over last season, he posted a 115 WRC+, which is 15% above average and was also above average defensively with a 2 fielding run value, making him the 7th best second baseman heading into 2025. At number 6 is Luis Garcia Jr. for the Washington Nationals. Everything I just said for Donovan pretty much applies to him as well. Puts the ball in play a lot, hits line drives, but Garcia definitely has him in the power department with a 51st percentile hard hit rate last season. He doesn't walk all that often and has a chase rate in the 9th percentile, so that's probably his biggest downside. Defensively, he's above average with a 5 outs above average last year in the 88th percentile and 75th percentile in fielding run value. He's only going to be 25 years old this season, so there's even more room for improvement. Coming in at number 5 is Jose Altuve for the Houston Astros. There are a couple reasons why I have him outside the top 4, and the main one is his defense. At -6 fielding run value last season, he was the worst defensive second baseman on this list, and he's going to be 35 years old next year, which in a predictive list, you have to take that into account. We saw the lowest walk rate he's posted since 2015 last season and the lowest xWOBA he's posted since 2015. The decline in these numbers isn't necessarily surprising given his age, but if they continue to slip, he won't be up here for much longer. He's still very good, which is why he's in the top 5, just maybe not as good as we're used to from Altuve heading into this year. At number 4 is Nico Hoerner, the starting second baseman for the Chicago Cubs. While Hoerner is certainly not going to light it up at the plate, he's now posted 4 straight years of a WRC plus over 100, which given the rest of his game is plenty. He is one of the best defensive second basemen in the game, and he's also really good on the bases. According to base running value, he was in the 95th percentile last year. He had 5 base running runs last season and 6.8 in 2023. Both of those were near the top of the league. Even though he was just a little above average offensively last year, he was able to be an almost 4-WAR player according to F-WAR and B-WAR because of how good he is on defense and on the bases. At number 3 is Jazz Chisholm for the New York Yankees. I think he probably moves back to his more natural position up the middle, and the Yankees kind of just throw someone at third base after Torres left via free agency. In terms of ceiling, Jazz probably has the highest out of anyone I've mentioned so far. He was in the 94th percentile in outs above average last season and put up 6 fielding run value, so defensively, there are no problems. Although defensive runs saved didn't like him last year, as his B-WAR was only 2.7. DRS is the oldest and probably the most outdated version of a defensive metric, so I wouldn't put too much weight into that. He might even be better when he goes back to an up-the-middle position where he's played for most of his career. He has both above average bat speed and hard hit rate, but his biggest problem is elevating the ball. He hits far too many ground balls, which is something that is fixable. If he is able to adjust a little and start hitting the ball in the air, there will be a lot more home runs hit, especially as a lefty in Yankee Stadium for a full season. Coming in at number 2 is Marcus Semien for the Texas Rangers. He was below average on offense last season with a WRC plus just below 100, yet he still put up 4.1 B-WAR and 4.0 F-WAR. This is obviously because of his defense. He's been elite in that department for years now, and even as his age gets up there, he still continues to show out in the field. He puts the ball in play a ton, he always has, but last year, his fly ball rate dropped by 5 percentage points, which is probably one of the main reasons we saw his overall production dip. That's a lot less concerning than if his quality of contact got significantly worse. His underlying numbers were still pretty similar to 2023 when he posted an OPS north of 820. We'll see if he can get back to that in 2025. Obviously, finishing us off at number 1 is Ketel Marte for the Arizona Diamondbacks. Out of all 30 of these players last season, he ranked first in F-WAR, B-WAR, expected WOBA, WOBA, and WRC+, while also having the second highest walk rate and 5th highest fielding run value. The gap between him and every other second baseman right now is very large. We saw a huge jump in exit velocity last year, all the way to the 98th percentile. That's up there with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and Giancarlo Stanton, except he's also a good defensive second baseman to go along with it. Like I said, he walks a lot, and he also doesn't strike out too much, with a K rate of 18.2% in the 72nd percentile. There was literally no hole in his game last year. He was an above-average base runner too, to go along with everything else I just said. For me, he's the pretty clear number 1 going into 2025. That does it for the second base rankings. Let me know if you would change anything. If anyone needs to be higher or lower, let me know. Make sure you're subscribed if you enjoyed, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.